Our grandson is on his way home, so let's indulge in steak once more, right this moment. Quick, let's get the catering sorted at my in-laws. We treat ourselves to steak through catering once a month, a delightful tradition. Yet again, I find myself left out. How many times has this happened now? Every time we order, my mother-in-law conveniently overlooks my steak, leaving me empty-handed. She's quite assertive, and I just can't seem to stand up to her. I suppose I'll have to endure it once more. Just when I was about to resign myself to the situation, Grandma's actions feel particularly unkind. My name is Raina, a 38-year-old housewife without any remarkable talents. I resorted to a matchmaking service to find my current husband, Craig. Marriage seemed elusive until I met Craig, who shared my passion for movies. Our bond blossomed over movie dates, leading to a smooth courtship and marriage. Initially kind, Craig's demeanor changed after our son was born. Two significant changes altered the course of our lives. Firstly, our son's intelligence soared, excelling academically far beyond his age. Despite his brilliance, he faced bullying at school and eventually stopped attending. Encouraged by a teacher, he now studies at Cambridge University in England. The second change was moving into my in-laws' house due to my husband's work relocation. Living with my in-laws was a stark transition. My father-in-law's illness confined him to the hospital, leaving only my mother-in-law at home. As a former working woman turned housewife, adapting to this new life proved challenging, setting the stage for further difficulties ahead. Feeling under the weather, I was greeted on my first day in my husband's family home with a directive. "Work hard for me, young one," my mother-in-law said. Yet she appeared far from unwell, exuding more energy than me. "How old are you, mother-in-law?" I inquired tentatively. 64 this year, my husband replied, his tone tinged with annoyance. Despite her apparent vigor, in this household, her word was law. My husband's warning left me feeling isolated. It was evident my mother-in-law harbored hostility towards me, but I hadn't anticipated my husband's detachment. Even though our marriage had cooled, his abandonment stung. "Let's get to work," my mother-in-law commanded, thrusting an old mop and bucket into my hands. Surveying the dusty corners, I yearned to wield the vacuum cleaner. However, she insisted I tackle it all with the mop, rejecting modern conveniences. "Can I use the vacuum cleaner?" I ventured, hoping to address the dust efficiently. "No, stick to the mop," she curtly replied. Reluctantly, I agreed, concealing my frustration. As I began cleaning, I proposed we work together, but my mother-in-law intervened, asserting that my husband and she would rest while I toiled alone. Daunted by the size of the house, I realized the task was insurmountable solo. To compound matters, my mother-in-law added the chore of dishwashing to my already overflowing plate. Overwhelmed, I struggled to keep pace with her demands, feeling the weight of my new responsibilities bearing down on me. "I can't handle it all. The house is too big," I confessed, overwhelmed. In response, my mother-in-law offered a solution. "I'll permit you to use the vacuum for $10 every 10 minutes. How's that?" But the cost was steep, far beyond my means. Her disdain for my financial situation stung, branding me a poor daughter-in-law. My husband, silent and unhelpful, stood by as I endured her belittlement. He even criticized my mopping technique, insisting it was improper to converse while cleaning. The solitude we shared before moving in with his parents had transformed into a form of psychological abuse. Amidst the tension, my mother-in-law announced plans for steak, summoning catering. Though exhausted from cleaning and dishwashing, the promise of steak fueled my determination. I had invested extra effort into preparing for this moment, eagerly anticipating the reward. As the catered steak arrived, my excitement peaked, but my joy was short-lived. Despite my efforts, my mother-in-law declared there was no steak for me, leaving me crestfallen. The disappointment cut deep, shattering my anticipation and leaving me deflated. "I've cleaned the floors and done the dishes," I informed my mother-in-law, only to be met with dismissal. "That's only natural," she replied. "Consider it a token of appreciation for letting you stay. Think of it as paying a fee through your actions. Did you think you could live here for free?" Her words pierced through me, amplifying the sense of hellishness that had engulfed my life since moving into my in-laws' house due to my husband's work. Financially constrained and unable to afford living independently, I relied on a meager monthly allowance of $200 since getting married. After covering essentials and previous expenses, there was nothing left to save. The naive expectation of security as a housewife shattered in the face of harsh reality. As for dinner, my mother-in-law's unpreparedness spoke volumes. While they indulged in high-quality steaks, I was offered noodles. The stark contrast highlighted my subordinate status in the family. Even the act of washing the knife and fork after their meal was the closest I came to the steak. From the very first day, mistreatment became routine, leaving me mentally and physically drained. Amidst this despair, a rare call from our son studying abroad brought a glimmer of warmth. Praising my embroidery, he reminded me of my skills. His words, a balm to my soul, stirred emotions long buried under layers of neglect. But even in my moment of happiness, his keen perception sensed my trembling voice. A testament to his high IQ and psychological acumen, his concern mirrored the distance between us. Yet in his distant words I found solace, a reminder that amidst the darkness there remained a flicker of light. I couldn't believe how much my son had changed. He seemed to have an uncanny ability to see through my facade, sensing something was amiss with Dad. After a moment of silence, I summoned the courage to confide in him about the situation at my in-laws' house. Despite feeling ashamed for airing my troubles, having someone to confide in felt like a lifeline. "It's tough every day," I admitted, but he reassured me. "I'll come over once it's our vacation, and I've saved up some money from my part-time job," he promised, refusing to take no for an answer. With my son's imminent return home, time seemed to fly during our overdue phone call. An hour passed, leaving me feeling rejuvenated by his unwavering support. However, as soon as the call ended, my mother-in-law approached with a sharp glare. "That's quite a luxurious long phone call," she remarked, draining the energy I had gained from our conversation. Despite my apologies, she swiftly shifted the conversation to the upcoming block party, assigning me the task of shopping and making a reservation for steak catering. The day of the block party arrived, and guests began to gather. My mother-in-law, dubbed the president by everyone, was the center of attention. Amidst the festivities, she wasted no time in ordering me around, using me as her servant regardless of who was present. Some guests spoke up in my defense, urging my mother-in-law to treat me more kindly, but her threats silenced them, reminding them of their place in the community. Their initial support quickly waned under her influence, leaving me feeling even more isolated. It became evident that my mother-in-law's control extended beyond our house, permeating the entire area. Against her power, I felt powerless, a mere housewife unable to challenge her authority. The ordered steak arrived, and my mother-in-law joyfully arranged it on the table. Her choice was surprisingly lavish, accompanied by an array of high-end side dishes like caviar and truffles. Yet even amidst the opulence, she couldn't resist lecturing me. "Do you really think you deserve such fine steak as a wife? You're 100 years too early for that," she chided, her words a public humiliation. The sympathetic glances from those around us only deepened my sense of isolation. No one dared oppose her, not even my husband, who quietly savored his steak. Hope flickered within me, hoping for even a small portion of the steak. But my mother-in-law's words dashed those hopes, offering beef noodles instead. Upgraded from the ordinary, but still far from what I craved. Frustration simmered beneath the surface until it boiled over, and I couldn't contain it any longer. "Mother-in-law, this is too much," I exclaimed, my voice breaking the tension. "I've prepared everything for today's block party, and yet you treat me like this." Her response was swift and harsh, shutting down any semblance of rebellion. "Is this true, Reina? Couldn't you show a little kindness?" My husband interjected, hoping to defuse the situation, but his words fell on deaf ears as my mother-in-law's resolve remained unshaken. Silenced by her intimidation, no one dared challenge her authority. In that moment, it became painfully clear that in this household her word was law, leaving me to navigate a world where my desires and efforts were constantly undermined. "Remember, you must obey Mother in this house," my husband's sudden, authoritative voice echoed through the room, causing my body to instinctively flinch. The once lively atmosphere fell silent, and even those who had supported me began to echo his sentiment, filling the room with resounding agreement. Frustrated and overwhelmed, I fled from the scene, seeking solace in the sanctuary of my bedroom. Time seemed to blur as I locked myself away, the weight of the situation bearing down on me until exhaustion claimed me. When I awoke, the block party had dispersed and the night had fallen. Glancing at my phone, I found an email from my son, announcing his imminent arrival. Despite the exhaustion, I drifted back to sleep, awaiting his return. The next morning, I found my mother-in-law in the kitchen preparing breakfast. Without preamble, she remarked on my behavior from the previous day, her words cutting through the air. Informed of my son's impending visit, she immediately pivoted to plans for steak, eager for his return. As evening descended, my son finally arrived home, greeted by a table laden with lavish steaks. Despite his usual enjoyment of the meal, he couldn't help but notice my absence from the feast. Concerned, he questioned my mother-in-law, only to be met with a dismissive response. "It's fine, Rihanna is always like this," she waved off his concern, redirecting his attention to the meal before him. Despite her apparent happiness at being reunited with her grandson, my son's response was unexpected, his words laden with a depth of emotion I hadn't anticipated. "I don't want it. Why didn't you prepare Mom's portion? This is discrimination, isn't it?" My son's cool demeanor caught both my mother and husband off guard, their surprise evident in their expressions. My mother-in-law, taken aback by his unexpected assertiveness, began to panic, denying any wrongdoing. "What did you hear?" "I didn't do anything," she stammered, but my son remained steadfast, unmasking her behavior with unwavering confidence. "You're always looking down on Mom, aren't you? People like that usually lack confidence or have nothing to be proud of, so they attack others to feel superior. It's a mean personality," he countered, his words piercing through her defenses. As my son continued to confront her, my mother-in-law found herself increasingly cornered, her usual tactics rendered ineffective against his insight. "That's true, isn't it? Everyone has an equal share of steak, but Mom has nothing." "This is clear discrimination," he asserted, his logic irrefutable. Normally, such confrontation would escalate into a fight, but my son's demeanor remained composed, far beyond his years. With each observation, my mother-in-law grew more subdued, her usual confidence waning in the face of his scrutiny. "You're panicking. Your eye movements, habits, and amount of sweat tell the story," my son continued, revealing his studies in psychology at Cambridge University and his keen observation skills. Despite her attempts to maintain composure, my mother-in-law couldn't conceal her discomfort, her facade crumbling under his scrutiny. Watching the exchange unfold, I marveled at my son's poise, while my husband observed in silence. As the tension lingered, my son's final words hung in the air, leaving us all to ponder the implications of his observations. The tension in the room was palpable as my son fearlessly confronted my mother-in-law. "Grandma, do you have any talents?" he asked, his tone cutting through the silence. My mother-in-law, usually quick with a retort, found herself at a loss for words as my son continued, unrelenting. "What you did, Grandma, was unfair. Mom excels in embroidery. Her work could even sell in England," my son praised, surprising me with his acknowledgement of my hobby. "You, Grandma, have none, yet you try to belittle Mom and assert dominance. Is it because you can't accept someone being superior?" As my son's words struck home, my mother-in-law remained speechless, unable to refute his observations. "And what about you, Dad? Why didn't you stand up for Mom when she needed help? Were you unable to stand up to Grandma because she's your mother? If so, why did you marry her?" My husband, caught off guard by our son's probing questions, could only offer silence in response. My son's relentless critique didn't spare anyone, exposing the underlying dynamics of our family dynamic. "You both just want to feel superior and look down on others," he concluded, leaving my husband and mother-in-law speechless. I couldn't help but feel proud of my son's maturity and insight. His suggestion to move to England together took me by surprise, but his reasoning soon became clear. "One of my classmates has a father who's a Hollywood actor. He saw pictures of your embroidery and wants to buy your work. There's a waiting list of over 200 people eager to purchase your pieces," he revealed, his smile contagious. Overwhelmed by the unexpected turn of events, I couldn't help but feel grateful for my son's unwavering support and encouragement. With his guidance, perhaps a new chapter awaited us, one where our talents were celebrated, not diminished. As my son shared his unexpected news, both my mother-in-law and husband listened with astonished expressions. "Mom, I've taken the liberty of arranging something for you. They want you to open a store with your handmade crafts in the UK, my son explained, his eyes shining with excitement. The thought of turning my hobby into a job, especially in England, left me speechless. While my mother-in-law and husband expressed their disbelief, I found myself considering the possibility. If I was going to face harassment at my in-laws' house anyway, why not pursue my passion as a profession? Moreover, The strained relationship with my husband made staying there unbearable. So, I made up my mind. I'll give it a try. I accepted, much to the shock of my family. And then, I dropped a bombshell. I'm divorcing you. I'm tired of being oppressed by your mother. Let me be free. With that, my husband reluctantly agreed, and my mother-in-law ranted until the end, but I paid her no mind. The divorce was finalized without fuss, and I was finally free from the confines of my in-laws' house. Now, in England, I'm busy preparing to open a shop, insisting on crafting all the products by hand. Despite the initial fear of moving abroad, my son's wholehearted support makes the journey less daunting. Meanwhile, back home, I heard from my son that my former mother-in-law stumbled and ended up in the hospital. With her incapacitated, my ex-husband struggles to manage alone, taking on extra work to cover expenses. While it's a challenging time for them, I hope they find their way forward. As for me, I'm focused on the future, working on the final pieces for the shop's opening. With my son by my side, I feel confident in facing whatever challenges lie ahead. From rescuer to the rescued, our roles have shifted, but as a mother, I'll always support my son, just as he supported me.
Didn't I mention I was going golfing with my boss today? Geez, don't bother me for things like that, I exclaimed frantically when I called my husband. The response I received was cold and distant. Just moments before, I had received news of our daughter's involvement in a car accident. She was reportedly taken to the hospital, and despite the urgency of the situation, my husband, who was out golfing, showed no signs of concern. "What are you talking about? She's your daughter too," I exclaimed, but his demeanor remained unchanged. "I don't care. Golfing with my boss is more important than she is," he replied. My name is Catherine, a 42-year-old homemaker living with my husband, Bob, and our daughter. Bob, 3 years my senior, works for a major company downtown. We met at a party thrown by a mutual friend, and his dedication to his job as a business person attracted me. When Bob asked me out, I was over the moon, and his proposal day felt like floating on cloud 9. After getting married, I quit my job to focus on household chores, enjoying our newly life. A year later, we were blessed with a daughter named Emily. Raising her wasn't easy, but my mother-in-law, who had lost her husband and lived alone, was always there to help, a blessing indeed. Emily is now in her sophomore year of high school, studying hard, active in school activities, and enjoying her teenage life with friends. However, a noticeable change occurred in our harmonious family life about 6 months ago. It started after a long weekend when Bob planned a trip with his colleagues. Emily and I spent the holiday just the two of us. On the last day of the holidays, Bob returned and we had dinner together as a family for the first time in a few days. During dinner, Emily nervously approached the topic of her plans after high school. She had consulted with me while Bob was away and had already decided to go to college, which I supported. However, contrary to expectations, Bob grimaced and replied dismissively, "Why should I care? Do whatever you want." Taken aback by his cold response, I unintentionally let out a gasp. Bob immediately left the table without clearing his plate, stomping off to his room as if in a bad mood. Left behind, Emily and I were puzzled by Bob's unusually distant behavior. "I wonder what got into Dad. Did I say something wrong?" Emily asked. "He's probably just tired from the trip. We'll discuss your plans another time." I tried to console her. Although Emily seemed uneasy, she accepted my explanation. However, the following day, Bob's cold attitude persisted. From that point onward, he blatantly ignored Emily, refusing to engage in any conversation with her and consistently acting indifferent. Moreover, he started spending more time away on weekends, causing a significant decrease in the time we spent together as a family. Discussing Emily's future became an impossible task given the strained atmosphere. Feeling consistently ignored and without understanding why, Emily began to resent her father. Even my attempts to mediate proved futile, and their relationship worsened. Concerned about the situation, I consulted with my mother-in-law, who had a good relationship with Bob. She even tried to scold him, but it only made Bob angrier, leading him to snap and retort with a dismissive, "Mind your own business." To make matters worse, he blamed me for discussing the issue with my mother-in-law. On the night she came over after Emily locked herself in her room, Bob yelled at me, accusing, "Why did you talk to my mom?" "Don't meddle. It's because you've been cold to Emily, isn't it? Why are you ignoring her now? You used to dote on her so much." When I mustered the courage to ask why, Bob just glared at me with annoyance and didn't provide an answer. No matter how hard I tried to mediate between the two of them, Bob's attitude remained unchanged. Time went by without knowing the reason for his sudden change, but considering the shift in behavior after his return from a long weekend trip, it's reasonable to assume that something happened during that time. Perhaps someone filled his head with nonsense. Unable to figure it out on my own, I decided to talk to my mother-in-law and investigate the reason for Bob's change. Then, one Sunday, both Bob and Emily were out since the morning. As I carried on with my usual housework at home, I received a call on the landline just before noon. It was an unknown number, and with suspicion, I picked up. To my surprise, the caller claimed to be from the police. "Are you related to Emily?" the officer asked. "Yes, I'm her mother." "Oh my God, did something happen to her?" I inquired with a sinking feeling. The officer's response was unexpected. "Actually, the bus Emily was on got into a traffic accident," he explained, leaving me momentarily speechless. I felt a wave of dizziness, and my hands, holding the phone, started to shake. Emily had informed me she was going to the mall with friends, and apparently, she was on the bus at the time of the accident. According to the officer, a car from the opposite lane crashed into the bus, and Emily and her friend were taken to a city hospital. After hearing the details of the accident and hanging up, I was in shock and couldn't move for a while. However, I knew I had to inform Bob quickly. I rushed to call him on my cell, and after more than 20 seconds of ringing, Bob answered, grumbling, "What is it?" Ignoring his tone, I frantically conveyed what had happened to Emily. "Bob, this is serious. I just got a call from the police. The bus Emily was on got into an accident, and she's apparently been taken to the hospital," I explained, tears streaming down my face. But ignoring my panic, Bob coldly responded, "So what? What do you want me to do about it?" Seeing no signs of him being disturbed and feeling as if he couldn't care less, I got even more frustrated. "What are you saying?" "Please head to the hospital now." "I'm going to." Before I could tell him the name of the hospital, Bob cut me off, saying, Didn't I tell you I have a golf outing with my boss today? I'm staying overnight and coming back tomorrow morning. Can't help it." True, he had mentioned a golf outing a few days ago, but I was shocked by Bob's lack of concern about our daughter's accident. "How can you even say that, Bob?" "Emily is your daughter," I pleaded. Bob replied, "I don't care. Golf with my boss is more important than her. You go to the hospital on your own," before hanging up abruptly. I tried calling back immediately, but it seemed he turned off his phone. I sent a text, but given his attitude, I doubted he would reply. Even though they had been distant, Emily is his flesh and blood. How could he be so heartless? This incident completely shattered my trust in Bob, and I was certain I couldn't continue living with him. I decided on divorce, but heading to the hospital was my top priority. So, I hurriedly left home. As he had declared, Bob didn't come home that day, staying at a hotel alone because the golf course was too far away. He even took the next day off work. When Bob came home the next morning, he was surprisingly cheerful. It was hard to believe for a father whose daughter had an accident the previous day. "Hey, what happened to Emily? Is she hospitalized?" Though Bob asked about Emily's condition, his casual tone made it clear he wasn't genuinely concerned. I sat in the living room, and when Bob noticed my downcast expression, he asked about Emily. Looking up at the sky, I replied, "She's there." For some reason, Bob seemed pleased, saying, "I see. Well, that's a relief. Once Emily's funeral is over, we can get divorced right away." With that, he pulled out a piece of paper, an invoice from a lawyer specializing in divorce procedures, and thrust it in front of me. It served as both a contract for lawyer consultation and already had his signature on it. Though Bob appeared quite prepared, having already decided to divorce him, it might have saved me some hassle. All right, I got it. I quietly agreed to the divorce. Bob didn't discuss the reason for the divorce. He just walked away to his room without saying anything else, as if he was done with me. The Bob who once cherished Emily and valued our family was gone. It was a harsh realization, but I didn't feel sad, only an increasing resentment towards him. I then called my mother-in-law and informed her about Bob's return and the lawyer's contact. Within an hour, my mother-in-law arrived at our house, and Bob returned to the living room. As soon as my mother-in-law saw Bob, she approached him with tears in her eyes, questioning, "Bob, what were you doing when your family needed you the most? I never thought you'd be this cold-hearted." Even when scolded by his mother, Bob showed no remorse, stating, "I had prior commitments. What can I do?" And it was all her making a big fuss. Looking at me with a mocking attitude, he continued, "I've been dying to get divorced. With Emily gone, I feel so relieved. Now I can leave without any regrets." Unable to tolerate it any longer, I shouted, thrusting a few pictures at Bob. The pictures depicted a man and a woman intimately together. The moment he saw them, Bob's face turned pale. The man in the pictures was unmistakably Bob. Stammering, he asked, "Where did you get these pictures?" I calmly replied, "They were taken yesterday afternoon. Weren't you supposed to be at a business golf outing? Instead, you were with a young woman. What were you up to?" Confronted, Bob averted his eyes with a frustrated look and began making excuses like, "She's just a colleague from work. We just went golfing together." I sighed in disbelief, remarking, "Golfing in such fancy clothes? I don't think so." "I already know you're cheating, so save your breath." The word cheating made Bob's face stiffen. His inability to deny it immediately was telling. But this wasn't the first time I learned of Bob's affair. Recently, he often left the house without telling me where he was going. After discussing with my mother-in-law and obtaining financial help, I had hired a private investigator. The investigation revealed that whenever he went out, he met the woman in the photos, exposing his affair. His so-called business golf was a complete lie, and he probably stayed at a hotel with his lover. I had more evidence of his affair. I even have a video of you and that woman coming out of a hotel. "Don't think you can get out of it," I declared. When I said that, Bob looked pleadingly at his mother, but she already knew of his infidelity and firmly shook her head in disapproval. To cheat and not even visit Emily in the hospital, and then to selfishly rejoice, thinking she's dead. "I don't know how you'll face your father," my mother-in-law said with a mix of anger and sorrow. Bob froze in shock, his mouth agape. "Wait, Isn't Emily dead?" he stammered. I explained to a bewildered Bob, "Don't jinx it. You misunderstood. She's very much alive. The injuries from the accident were just minor scratches. Emily was taken to the hospital yesterday, but she was fine and had no major injuries. The accident wasn't severe, so she came home the same day." Bob misunderstood my comment, looking up to the sky. "She's there," and assumed Emily had passed away. "Emily is on her school trip as planned. She'll be landing soon," I continued. "A school trip." Bob was taken aback, his eyes wide. Bob, who didn't care about his daughter, had completely forgotten about Emily's school trip. The trip started today and was for 3 nights and 4 days. Emily had gone shopping for it yesterday, and the doctor had said that there wouldn't be any issues with Emily going on the school trip, so she left as scheduled this morning. When I told Bob that Emily was up in the sky, probably boarding the plane, I used those words to indirectly blame him for not worrying about our daughter. "Oh, that's what happened. Well, I'm glad Emmeline is okay. I hope she enjoys her trip," Bob said nonchalantly. "How can you say that now? You knew how much she'd been looking forward to this trip since sophomore year. But I guess you'd be just as happy if she had an accident. You probably forgot all about it, I sternly rebuked Bob, who tried to feign laughter. I didn't have a shred of affection left for him. No matter what he says in the future, I'm never going to trust Bob again. Just then, an email notification popped up on Bob's smartphone. After reading the message, Bob's body began to tremble with anger. Shoving the screen in my face, he shouted, "Hey, what the hell is this?" I looked at the screen with my mother-in-law, and it was from Emily with a concise message. "I can't consider someone who prioritizes his affair over his family as my father. I'm cutting ties with you." It was as if she was sending a message to a stranger. It seemed that Emily learned yesterday about Bob's lie about playing golf when he was actually meeting his mistress. She probably sent the email after landing. Being bluntly disowned by his 17-year-old daughter, Bob's face, which was pale just moments ago, turned a deep shade of red from shame and anger. He glared at me and began yelling, "This is all your fault. Weren't you the one who cheated first?" I was completely lost. "What are you talking about? When did I ever cheat?" I protested. "Jessica told me," Bob said. "Jessica? Who's that?" Then it hit me. The detective agency found out that Bob's mistress was named Jessica Accord. According to Bob, Jessica had filled his head with baseless lies about me when they first started their affair. She told him that I had cheated on him and that Emily was fathered by someone else. The detective agency confirmed that he began his affair 6 months ago, right when the relationship between Bob and Emily started to sour. Since Jessica works at the same company as Bob, they likely started their affair during the long weekend. Jessica had been spreading outrageous lies, saying I had cheated and had Bob raise Emily, a child fathered by another man. But Emily doesn't look or act anything like me. It's natural for me to have doubts. Both my mother-in-law and I were rendered speechless at Bob's outburst. Thinking Emily wasn't his because of Jessica's lie, he began to resent her and treated her coldly. But he didn't want to divorce because he didn't want to pay child support. However, mistaking Emily's accident for her death yesterday, he was relieved, thinking he could divorce without any complications. "You've got to be kidding me! So you believed a lie your mistress cooked up over your own family?" I shouted angrily. Bob responded with a dismissive laugh. "I don't care whether it's true or not. I'm going to divorce you and be with Jessica." Before I could retort, my mother-in-law stepped in with a stoic face. She sighed deeply as she locked eyes with Bob. I realized she was livid. "I wonder where I went wrong raising you. I'm so ashamed. Did you forget that Emily looked just like you when she was a baby? She's definitely your child," she said. "I told you, I don't care about that anymore," Bob retorted defiantly. Right then, someone knocked at the front door. I went to answer and brought the guest to the living room. Bob looked puzzled. The visitor was a man in a suit around our age. Bob rudely asked, "Who the hell are you? Are you her lover or something?" Unfazed, the man handed Bob his business card with a smile. Bob accepted the business card with disbelief. But the next moment, his eyes widened in surprise as he read, "Lawyer." Yes, he was the lawyer I had hired with the help of my mother-in-law. I had consulted him about Bob around the same time I had the detective agency investigate. I had asked him to come over yesterday, anticipating that Bob would do something rash given the situation with Emily. I suspected it had to do with Emily, and I had a feeling Bob might have done something unthinkable. I instructed Bob, "Call your mistress over right now." Bob started panicking and asked, "Why would Jessica be involved at this point?" The lawyer chimed in, "It's quite unreasonable to say she's not involved. Call her now." Bob had no comeback to that, realizing he had no way out. Reluctantly, he contacted his mistress. About 30 minutes later, a young woman arrived at the house. Jessica, in her 20s, probably took a personal day off from work just like Bob. She approached us with a disgruntled look, saying, "What's this all about? I've got nothing to do with your family issues." Despite Jessica's refusal, I informed her that I was divorcing Bob and that even if she stayed with him, he'd have to pay child support to Emily, who was about to go to college. "I have nothing to do with this," she insisted. However, The lawyer promptly responded, "We have plenty of evidence of the affair. Plus, you fed Bob some nasty lies which resulted in irreparable damage to Catherine and her family. That's defamation, and we could sue you for it." By the time the lawyer finished explaining, both Bob and Jessica had turned pale, realizing they were out of options. Not wanting a court battle, Bob agreed to pay child support properly. We went through a divorce, and later on, I heard that Bob's company found out he had been using his boss as a cover for his affairs. The whole company was appalled by the way he handled the situation, especially when they found out he pretended to be happy about his daughter's fake death. Exposing his true nature led him to resign from his position. Finding a new job proved difficult as word of Bob's misconduct spread within the industry. Although he managed to find part-time jobs, his pride got in the way, leading to constant issues with colleagues, and he quit frequently. The savings set aside for Emily's future had already been spent on his affair with Jessica. Soon after our divorce, the two broke up, and Jessica apparently quit her job too. But now that's none of my concern. Struggling, Bob turned to his mother for help but was denied. He even tried to cozy up to me and Emily, saying, "Please, I was wrong. Let's start over, the three of us." Of course, we rejected him, blocked his contacts, and moved to a new place with the help of his mother. Now his mother lives near us, and we continue to maintain a close relationship. I have no idea what became of Bob, and I never want to be involved with him again. Freed from the stress of the troubled relationship with his father, Emily has been thriving in high school. Now, as a senior, she got accepted into her first-choice college. "Congratulations, Emily. You did an amazing job," I said. "Thanks, Mom. It's all because you and Grandma supported me," Emily responded, tears streaming down her face. "Since the college is commutable from our home, we plan to live together as we always have." I managed to find a job shortly after becoming a single parent and now work full-time. We have enough savings to cover Emily's tuition. I'm hoping for a bright future as we move forward, living happily with our family. Emily sneered at me after I announced my resignation, and I responded by maintaining a silent, steady gaze. Our conversation had revolved around the company's decision to cut labor costs, with particular disdain aimed at those supposedly exploiting overtime pay. Tom, too, seemed to relish the notion of trimming expenses. A week later, my phone incessantly rang with calls from the company. Upon answering, the president inquired sharply, "Who exactly are you?" I couldn't help but scoff mockingly at the president's question. In response, I introduced myself as Lily Johnson, a 59-year-old employee with 37 years of dedicated service since my college graduation. I explained our company's role in providing administrative services, particularly catering to busy company presidents handling clerical work. Specializing in tax-related matters, I proudly managed 45 clients, a responsibility that had grown overwhelming despite the assistance of a part-timer. Despite the challenges, I couldn't show any sign of weakness. Our clients were long-standing relationships, and their adversities fueled my determination. Today, as I sat in front of my computer, the relentless harassment from Tom and Emily weighed heavily on my mind. Tom, 7 years my junior and now the head of the tax department, had drastically changed his demeanor 3 months ago upon promotion. His once polite tone was replaced with condescension and complaints, making every interaction a struggle. Even when I countered, he remained unfazed, instructing me to consult the manual for guidance and warning against unnecessary actions. Emily, Tom's assistant, joined in the harassment, criticizing my efficiency and mocking my rank and file status. Despite being the first to decline a promotion to department head, a fact unknown to Tom and Emily, I committed to completing my regular duties. Their harassment persisted, with Tom accusing me of increasing overtime, branding it a waste. Emily echoed his sentiment, sighing as she claimed my constant overtime was dragging down the entire tax department's performance. The recent cause of my overtime was Tom unexpectedly leaving a month's worth of client files on my desk to be filed by the end of the month after work. My face drained of color as I glanced at the files before me. "Wait, these all have deadlines this month, right?" I uttered in confusion. However, before I could grasp the gravity of the situation, Tom was already packing up his desk, completely uninterested in addressing my concerns. "I'm heading out. Take care with that," he casually remarked as he swiftly left the office, leaving me with a pile of urgent tasks. Emily followed suit, adding insult to injury with a mocking laugh. The incredulity of the situation weighed on me, and I sighed heavily as I opened the client files scattered on my desk. To my dismay, some of the files were originally Emily's responsibility. The realization deepened my sigh. I understood why Tom had been subjecting me to relentless harassment. They wanted me to retire quickly. My extensive experience and deeper knowledge in taxation made me a preferred resource for other members of the tax department over Tom. Tom's unapproachable demeanor and unattractive appearance made everyone, except Emily, avoid him. It seemed Emily's proximity to him was strategic, driven by Tom's preference for younger female employees. The shallow nature of their thinking sent a chill down my spine. Emily's harassment was not just a personal vendetta. She aimed to curry favor with Tom, the one evaluating the tax department's performance. Despite these challenges, I had to manage the declarations. Alongside preparing tax declarations for my assigned companies, it seemed today's workload was far from over. However, claiming overtime would only invite complaints from Tom and Emily, leaving me resigned to the prospect of unpaid extra hours. Then, unexpectedly, I received a summons to the president's office. Our company had recently undergone a change in leadership due to the former president's sudden illness. The new president, the former president's son, wasn't fully acquainted with our company. As I entered the office, I noticed Tom and Emily with unpleasant smirks on their faces. In a tense atmosphere, the president dropped a bombshell. "Lily, we'll need you to resign by the end of this month." My mind spun as I asked for clarification. Tom and Emily had apparently accused me of overbilling for overtime, citing that while others had around 15 hours, I had exceeded 80 hours. The president, oblivious to the true circumstances, seemed impressed with Tom and Emily's zero overtime. The reality of the situation hit me. The inflated overtime was a result of doing Tom and Emily's work. However, revealing Tom's instructions would risk portraying it as my own inability to manage time effectively. I presented the facts, asserting that I hadn't overbilled for overtime but struggled to finish my workload within regular hours. The president sighed deeply, expressing doubt but acknowledging the lack of evidence to pursue the matter further. Nevertheless, he insisted that they couldn't retain someone working at such a slow pace. Resigned to the situation, the president suggested my resignation, and it seemed his mind was made up. Told to leave the company I had devoted 37 years to, I felt a weariness settle in. Despite my dedication, the additional workload from Tom and Emily went unappreciated. I agreed to resign at the end of the month, acknowledging that I had already communicated my decision to the president. As I glanced at Tom and Emily, their vulgar smiles reflected satisfaction. Leaving the president's office, Emily taunted me with a sarcastic, "Thanks for quitting," her sneer cutting through. I responded with a silent stare, facing similar disdain from Tom, who shared his approval of cutting labor costs and labeled me as someone exploiting overtime pay. Observing their cheerful conversation, I pondered the handover process. Creating documents for all my clients, I ensured proper farewells and appointments with those I could meet personally. Unable to schedule a meeting with the president, I resorted to letters to inform them of my successor. A week post-resignation, enjoying a moment of relaxation at home, my mobile phone rang. Seeing the company's call, I hesitated, having already completed social insurance procedures. However, persistent calls from both the company and Tom and Emily's personal mobiles led me to answer reluctantly. As I picked up, the president urgently spoke, asking, "Who exactly are you?" I couldn't help but mockingly reply, "Just an unemployed lady who resigned from the company, nothing else." In response, the president urgently explained the chaos since my departure, 49 calls to stop transactions with the company. He pleaded for my immediate return, revealing a sense of panic in his tone. Reluctantly, I rose from my seat and made my way back to the company. Upon my arrival, I found Tom and Emily waiting, their faces notably pallid and dark circles underlining their weary eyes. Surprised by their drastic change in appearance, I inquired about what was happening. Tom glared at me and revealed, "Since you left, we've been bombarded with calls to stop transactions, not just from your clients but also from prospective companies we were planning to introduce." "What did you do?" Emily echoed the suspicion, expressing disillusionment at the thought of me resorting to underhanded tactics. Their haggard appearance suggested the toll handling cancellations. While I had not manipulated the clients, I had a hunch about the reason behind the transaction halts. Considering the inevitability of cancellations, I mumbled my thoughts aloud. Tom, however, accused me outright, insisting I had orchestrated something. He demanded I go to the president's office immediately, forcefully escorting me there. Upon entering the president's office with Tom and Emily, the president greeted me with a direct look in his eyes. Tom declared, "President, I brought her," with an air of authority, while Emily hurriedly followed suit. Ignoring their accusatory tone, the president questioned me about the abrupt halt in transactions after my departure. I took a deep breath and explained, "Our clients don't need us to manage their taxes. There are tax accountant firms that offer cheaper services. They continued with us because of me." Tom snapped back, questioning my self-worth, and Emily taunted me, both challenging my value to the company. Undeterred, I elaborated on my unique approach, offering tailored tax-saving strategies that resonated with our clients. Tom dismissed it as inefficient, arguing that their manual-based operations were more practical. The president sighed deeply, recognizing the fundamental difference in our approaches. In a serious tone, he said, "Actually," signaling a crucial revelation or decision to follow. I received a surprising call from my father, the former president. It turns out that some clients, who had stopped transactions, went directly to Dad to negotiate on my behalf. I hadn't anticipated clients going to such lengths for me. Dad emphasized that the tax department thrived because of my contributions. Not only did I manage my clients efficiently, but I also supported my colleagues' clients, possessing knowledge that even Tom couldn't match. Dad disclosed that if I hadn't declined the promotion, I would have held a higher position than a department head by now. The current president expressed regret with a pained expression. Emily appeared shocked, probably grappling with the idea that I could have been her superior. The president apologized for making me resign initially and asked if I would consider revoking my resignation. According to Dad, I was indispensable to the company. While I appreciated the change in the president's perspective, I hesitated to accept. Tom interrupted our conversation, visibly upset, and protested the president's decision, questioning why I was chosen over him. Emily echoed his sentiments, praising Tom's leadership and expressing disbelief at the preference for me. The president then sternly addressed them, revealing that since my resignation, numerous complaints had been received from the tax department, suggesting they had been shifting their workload onto others. Tom's face turned pale as the president exposed the fact that he had been pushing the preparation of client declaration forms onto subordinates, including Emily's work for multiple clients. The president pointed out the irony, considering Tom had accused me of being a salary thief. Observing Tom and Emily's pale expressions, the president continued by revealing an alleged leak about their romantic involvement. Tom struggled to defend himself, claiming he was merely mentoring Emily as her superior. However, the president produced receipts from the accounting department, indicating dining expenses filed by Tom. Confronted with evidence, Tom, sweating profusely, was unable to provide a convincing explanation. Emily, too, turned ghostly pale as the president accused them of neglecting their duties, inflating expense claims, and violating company policy by having an affair in the office while being married. In a calm and straightforward manner, the president declared the termination of their employment effective immediately. Tom and Emily tried to resist, promising to retract the receipt claims and pleading for their jobs. "I have a family," Tom desperately pleaded, attempting to reverse his termination. Emily echoed his sentiments, tearfully expressing her fear of being fired. She promised to apologize to me and others for burdening them with work. Realizing the gravity of the situation involving neglect of duties and an affair with a supervisor, concerned about her reputation, she implored for a second chance. Sensing their desperation, I offered advice. "Why don't you stop resisting? It's undignified," I suggested. Tom glared at me, retorting, "Shut up. What would a single person like you understand?" I sighed, reminding him, "Tom, you were the one who got me fired. It's just karma. What goes around comes around. Why don't you take some responsibility and reflect a bit?" Frustrated, Tom looked away, while Emily bit her lip in distress. Aware of more details about their misconduct, I turned to the president, asking with a smile if I should share them. Tom and Emily frantically tried to stop me, fearing further exposure. I issued an ultimatum, warning them that wrongdoings would eventually come to light, urging them to face reality before it worsened. At my words, both Tom and Emily collapsed to their knees, and the president decided to fire them on the spot. Later, I revealed more about their misdeeds, including Tom faking business trips to spend days with Emily and their insidious tactics of harassing disliked employees into quitting. Despite my attempts to help those employees, Tom and Emily's strategies were relentless. They repeatedly reprimanded and pressured employees out of my sight, often assigning sudden tasks with tight deadlines. The resigned employees had initially asked me to keep quiet, but since they were now happily working elsewhere, I decided it was time to speak up. The president, furious at my revelations, expressed anger about cutting Tom and Emily's final salary. He planned to thoroughly investigate past inflated expense claims. Tom, with tears in his eyes, begged the president not to cut his salary, fearing the impact on his family. As the truth unraveled, Tom's affair with Emily came to light, leading to Tom's divorce. The two now face claims for compensation in the divorce lawsuit, marking the consequential aftermath of their actions. I became aware of the situation when Tom reached out to me, seeking assistance in persuading the president to reconsider their firing. Emily and Tom found themselves in dire straits. Despite their efforts, they struggled to secure new jobs in the tax industry. The industry's close-knit nature meant that word of their misdeeds spread rapidly, making potential employers hesitant to hire them. Desperate for income to cover divorce compensation and living expenses, they resorted to day labor at construction sites, a stark departure from their previous office roles. Emily would often call me in tears, pleading for help. "Lily, please help. I only wanted a better life, and I never truly liked Tom," she'd cry. However, I couldn't ignore the fact that their predicament was a consequence of their own actions. Many, including myself, had been impacted by their behavior. I reminded Emily that the consequences were a result of her choices. "You can't unring a bell," I told her firmly. Facing hardships was the consequence of her decisions. Emily's despair echoed through her protests. Despite her regrets, the outcome remained unchanged. As for me, I chose to distance myself from the chaos of the corporate world. Despite the president's pleas for my return, I declined. Once told to resign, I had no desire to return. Instead, I found solace in assisting at a friend's tax office, supplementing my income and enjoying a more relaxed lifestyle. In the future, I entertained the idea of starting my own office, where I could serve my clients without the constraints of corporate bureaucracy. In my own space, I could fully dedicate myself to my clients' needs. As a tax accountant, I aspired to be on equal footing with my clients, providing service without superiority. This marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one filled with excitement and opportunities to pursue what truly mattered to me. My second life had just begun, and I eagerly anticipated the journey ahead. Hi, I'm Anna, and my life took an unexpected turn 5 years into my marriage with Paul. We were your typical couple. I was a teacher, and he worked as a manager at an energy company. Life was relatively uncomplicated until his father passed away, leaving his mother, Elaine, alone in their family house. It was at this point that Paul dropped a bombshell. "Anna, we need to talk," Paul said abruptly one night, his tone serious enough to make me pause mid-scroll on my phone. I looked up, asking, "Everything okay?" He took a deep breath. It's about Mom. She's alone in that old house since Dad passed. I think we should move in with her. I felt my stomach drop. Move in with Elaine? You know Elaine and I barely get along. He leaned against the kitchen counter, his expression firm. I know, but she's my mom and she's struggling. Plus, we're just burning money on this rented apartment. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. But this is our space, our home. Moving in with your mom, it's a whole different ballgame. Paul's voice took on a pleading edge. Please, Anna, it's not just about the space. It's about family. Mom needs us. Feeling cornered, I bit my lip. Your mom needs us, or you need your mom. That's not fair, Anna. It's not like I'm asking you to live in a dump. It's a huge house, plenty of room for all of us, he argued. Crossing my arms, I felt the tension rise. And what about our life here? Just drop everything because Elaine snaps her fingers. It's not like that, and you know it. I'm thinking about what's best for everyone, he retorted. Everyone or just Elaine? I shot back. He threw his hands up in frustration. Damn it, Anna. Can't you just try to see the bigger picture here? Glaring at him, I responded, I am looking at the bigger picture. Paul, our life, our independence. Not just playing happy families in that gloomy old house of hers. The argument went in circles, but eventually, I caved for the sake of peace. Moving day arrived, and it was as uncomfortable as I had imagined. Elaine's house was an imposing old structure with echoing rooms and a constant chill in the air. Elaine greeted us with a stiff smile, saying, Welcome to my home. I expect you to respect my ways. I forced a smile, trying to keep the peace. Of course, Elaine. We appreciate you letting us stay. However, living with Elaine was akin to living with a hawk. She had a comment for everything. From the way dishes were put away to how the plants were watered. It was relentless. One night, after a particularly harsh critique on my cooking, I exploded to Paul in our room. I can't do a damn thing right for your mother. It's like living with a drill sergeant. Paul rubbed his temples, looking equally frustrated. Anna, just give it time. She's old and set in her ways. I threw my hands up in frustration. Great, so we just tiptoe around her till the end of time. He didn't have an answer, and honestly, neither did I. This house, with its constant surveillance and Elaine's scrutinizing eyes, was suffocating. Life in Elaine's house was turning into a daily grind. Just when I thought I could handle it, Paul dropped another bombshell. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon, and I was trying to find some peace in the garden when he came out. Anna, we need to talk, he said. I looked up, feeling a knot in my stomach. What now, Paul? He took a deep breath. I think you should quit your job and stay home. We're spending a fortune on a nurse and housekeeper for Mom. It makes more sense. I stood up, anger rising. Quit my job, Paul. I love teaching. It's not just about the money. He ran his hand through his hair, his tone getting edgy. I know, but think about it. It'll make things easier around here. I shook my head, disbelief washing over me. So what? I just become a full-time maid and nurse. That's not the life I want. Paul's voice rose. It's not about what we want, Anna. It's about what's practical. My mom needs us. I glared at him. No, your mom needs you. I didn't sign up to be her caretaker. He shot back. Well, things change, Anna. We need to adapt. That word felt like a slap. I loved my job, my independence. This wasn't adapting. This was sacrificing. You know what, Paul? Fine. I'll do it, but don't expect me to be happy about it. He sighed, a look of relief crossing his face. Thank you, Anna. It means a lot. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like I was losing a part of myself. Quitting my job was hard, but the days that followed were even harder. I was now a full-time housekeeper, nurse, and cook. Elaine, as always, had her 2 cents to add about everything. One day, I snapped. Elaine was criticizing the way I ironed her clothes, and I couldn't take it anymore. Elaine, can you just stop? I'm doing my best here, I said, my voice shaking with frustration. She looked taken aback. Well, I'm sorry if I have standards, Anna. I threw the iron down. I'm not your servant, Elaine. I'm your son's wife. I'm here trying to help. and all you do is criticize me." There was a moment of tense silence, and then Elaine's expression softened slightly. "I know you're trying, Anna. I'm just used to things a certain way," she said softly. I sighed, feeling the tension drain out of me. "I know, Elaine, but not you. I have my way of doing things." From that day on, things were slightly better. Elaine toned down her criticisms, and I tried to accommodate her quirks. It was a fragile truce, but it was better than the constant battles. As time dragged on in Elaine's house, the atmosphere grew tenser, almost suffocating. Paul's behavior became increasingly distant and elusive. He was always late from work, and when he was home, he might as well have been invisible, retreating to the spare room like it was his sanctuary. One evening, unable to bear the silence and distance anymore, I cornered him in the kitchen. "Paul, what's going on with you? You're hardly here. And when you are, it's like you're not even my husband anymore." He avoided eye contact, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. "Work's a nightmare right now, Anna. Just piles of stress." I leaned back against the counter, my arms folded. "I could sense the stress, Paul, but this feels like you're shutting me out. You're here, but you're not really here." He exhaled heavily, his gaze still fixed on his coffee. "I don't know what you want me to say, Anna. I'm just really tied up with stuff." I wanted to believe him, to understand, but something inside me screamed that there was more to it. Then there was Lucy, Paul's sister, who made it her mission to add to the tension. Each visit from her was a trial. She looked around the house with a sneer and quip. "Still stuck in this old dump, huh?" I usually bit my tongue, but one day her taunts hit a nerve. "Not all of us have the luxury to mooch off others, Lucy." I shot back. She just cackled, her voice grating on my nerves. "Look at you, playing the martyr in a haunted house. Pathetic." I clenched my jaw, holding back a barrage of words. Paul, ever the silent bystander, offered no defense. His silence was like another jab, another confirmation of the growing gulf between us. The biggest shift, however, came with Elaine. One day she called for Lucy, her voice frail and desperate. "Lucy, I need help with a bath. I can't manage on my own anymore." Lucy's response was cold and cutting. "Help yourself, Mom. I'm not your caretaker." Elaine broke down in tears, and my heart couldn't take it. Despite our rocky history, I couldn't leave her in that state. I assisted her with the bath, and something changed between us that day. Elaine started to warm up to me, treating me less like an intruder and more like a daughter. It was a welcome change, but it also underscored how far Paul and I had drifted apart. The house felt colder, emptier. Despite Elaine's newfound warmth towards me, the walls seemed to echo with the growing silence between Paul and me, a chasm that widened with each passing day. Paul's late nights at work became a norm, and our conversations turned into mere whispers of their former selves. During one of these fleeting interactions, Paul dropped a new piece of news. "Anna, I got an apartment near work," he said nonchalantly. I almost dropped the dish I was cleaning. "An apartment? Why on earth would you need that?" He leaned against the doorframe, avoiding my gaze. "It's just practical, Anna. Saves me the commute, especially with the late nights." I felt a surge of anger and confusion. "And you just decided this without talking to me? What are we, roommates now?" He shrugged, his indifference cutting deep. "I thought you'd be happy, less stressed about me coming home late." I shook my head in disbelief. "Happy, Paul? This feels like you're living a double life. What's next? You'll tell me you have a second family?" He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Don't be dramatic, Anna. It's not like that." I wanted to push further to break through his nonchalant facade, but I knew it was futile. The conversation ended there, as did many of our conversations those days. The true shock came a few days later in a candid conversation with Elaine. We were in the living room, sharing a rare moment of calm, when she suddenly said, "You know, Paul didn't buy that apartment with his money." I looked at her, puzzled. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then continued, "He used my savings. He said it was an investment, and he even put it in my name." I felt my heart sink. "He's been using your money, and you're okay with this?" Elaine shrugged, a sad look in her eyes. "I couldn't say no. He's my son. But I thought you should know. I was speechless. Paul's secret apartment was one thing, but using his mother's savings under the guise of an investment felt like the man I married was slipping away, replaced by this stranger with secrets and lies. A few days later, I confronted Paul about it. Paul, why didn't you tell me the apartment was bought with your mom's money? He was unapologetic, almost defiant. Because I knew you'd react like this. It's an investment, Anna. It's not a big deal. I couldn't believe his audacity. Not a big deal. You're gambling with your mom's savings and keeping it from me. What else are you hiding? He turned away, ending the conversation with a dismissive wave. You wouldn't understand, Anna. It's business. Business. That word felt like a chasm between us, an excuse for everything that was going wrong in our marriage. Living in Elaine's old, dreary house was taking its toll on me. The walls, once probably vibrant, now echoed a somber tone, and every creaking floorboard seemed to whisper secrets. One day, I just couldn't take it anymore. Elaine, have you ever thought about renovating the house? I asked her over breakfast. It could use some freshening up. Elaine looked up from her tea, surprised. Renovate? I haven't thought about it in years. It's such a big task. I nodded, feeling a spark of enthusiasm. I know, but it could really brighten up the place. Maybe just start with a new coat of paint or some new wallpaper. Elaine considered it for a moment. Well, I suppose it wouldn't hurt to bring some new life into this old house. But are you sure you're up for it? I smiled, eager for a project. Absolutely. It'll be a good change. And so it began. I threw myself into the renovation, painting walls, choosing wallpapers, and even attempting to restore some of the old furniture. It was hard work, but it felt good, like I was breathing life back into the house and, in a way, into myself. One day, while I was up to my elbows in paint, Paul walked in. He looked around, his expression one of shock and disbelief. What the hell, Anna? What are you doing to my mom's house? I stood up, wiping the sweat from my brow. I'm renovating, Paul, like I told Elaine. It's time this place got a little love and care. Paul's face reddened. You had no right to start changing things without asking me. This is my family home, not some DIY project. I felt my temper rise. Your home? When was the last time you even cared about this place, Paul? I'm doing something good here. He took a step closer, his voice rising. You're overstepping, Anna. You always do this. Try to control and push everyone else aside. I stared at him incredulously. Take control, Paul. I'm trying to make this gloomy place livable. Maybe if you spent more time here, you'd see that. Before Paul could retort, Elaine walked in. What's all this noise about? Paul turned to her. Mom, did you know about this? About her changing the house? Elaine looked from me to Paul, then back again. Yes, I did, and I'm glad she's doing it. This house needed a change, and Anna's doing a wonderful job. Paul looked like he'd been slapped. But it's our family home, he protested. Elaine cut him off, her tone firm. It's my home, Paul, and I want this. Anna has every right to do what she's doing. Paul stormed out of the room, leaving me and Elaine in an awkward silence. I felt a mix of victory and sadness as the house underwent transformation, but the gap between Paul and me seemed to grow wider. The day Elaine suffered a stroke, our world turned upside down. I was there, witnessing her sudden decline, her words slurring, her body weakening. Panic gripped me as I called for help, my voice quivering with fear. In the hospital, the grim reality set in. Elaine needed constant care. I looked to Paul for support, but he was distant, his eyes void of concern. Anna, I can't deal with this. I have enough on my plate, he said, his voice cold. I was stunned. You can't deal with this, Paul. She's your mother. He shrugged, his response cutting like a knife. Yeah, and she's been a burden for years. This is just the cherry on top. I couldn't hide my disgust. She's not a burden, Paul. She's family. She needs us. His laugh was bitter. Us? No, Anna. She needs you. I've got other things to handle. I was left speechless, my respect for him sinking. I took it upon myself to care for Elaine. It was hard watching the once strong woman confined to a bed, dependent for every little thing. As I became Elaine's primary caregiver, Paul's visits grew rarer, and his indifference more apparent. His visits were short, his conversations with Elaine brief and superficial. Then Lucy came. I overheard them in the living room, their words like venom. "We should start thinking about the will, dividing the assets," Lucy said, her voice devoid of any emotion. I burst into the room, fury coursing through my veins. How can you be so heartless, discussing her will right in front of her? She's still here. Lucy smirked, her words sharp. Oh, look who's talking, the saintly daughter-in-law. This is our family's matter, stay out of it. Paul chimed in, his voice laced with cynicism. Anna, just drop it. It's practical to plan these things. No use pretending she's going to bounce back. I was aghast at his cruelty. Practical? She's your mother, Paul. How can you be so callous? He shrugged his reply, cold and detached. Life's callous, Anna. Better get used to it. I turned away, my heart heavy with disgust. The following weeks, I devoted myself to Elaine's recovery, and to my surprise, she showed signs of improvement. Her fingers twitched, her speech cleared, and she even managed a few steps. It was a miracle to me, but a nuisance to Paul and Lucy. Their true colors were now vividly clear. Their mother's plight was nothing more than an inconvenience, a hurdle in their path of inheritance. The betrayal stung deep, not just as a daughter-in-law, but as a human being. Life had settled into a grim routine. Elaine's health was a constant roller coaster, with small victories overshadowed by the looming fear of the worst. Then it happened, another stroke, this time more severe. The call from the hospital felt like a punch to the gut. Elaine didn't make it. The funeral was a somber affair. I stood beside the grave, my heart heavy, watching as people paid their respects. That's when Paul arrived, and with him, a woman I didn't recognize and two small kids clinging to her hands. Who's she? I whispered to myself, my eyes fixed on the unfamiliar woman. Paul approached, his expression unreadable. Anna, this is Carol, my wife, and these are our kids. I felt like I had been slapped. Your wife? When did this happen? He shrugged, a coldness in his voice. A while ago. It's none of your business, Anna. I was speechless, my mind reeling. How could he? And during all this time with Elaine? Lucy was there too, her usual sneer in place. Finally showing your true colors, Anna, she sneered. It's a bit late for that. I glared at her, my voice laced with contempt. I was here for Elaine when you both abandoned her. Don't you dare judge me. Paul interjected, let's just get this over with. We have other matters to discuss. After the funeral ended and the gathering moved to Elaine's house for the will reading, Paul and Lucy were like vultures, eagerly awaiting their share. The lawyer began reading the will, and that's when the bombshell dropped. Everything, the house, the money, all of it was left to me. Paul's face went from smut to shocked. What the hell? This can't be right. Lucy was fuming. She was our mother. How could she leave everything to this nobody? I stood there stunned, not sure how to feel. Happy? Vindicated? It all felt hollow. Paul turned to me, his voice filled with accusation. You manipulated her, didn't you? Turned her against? I shook my head, disbelief and anger mixing in my voice. I did nothing but care for her, which is more than I can say for you, I said as the lawyer intervened. Elaine was very clear in her will. Lucy was seething. This is not the end. We'll contest this. There's no way we're letting her get away with this, she declared as they left in a huff. I stood there alone in the house that was now legally mine, the walls witnessing so much pain, betrayal, and love. I looked around, feeling the weight of Elaine's last act of kindness and the burden of a broken family. The house felt different now, like it was echoing with Elaine's last wishes. I was sitting there holding the will, still trying to get my head around everything. Elaine had left it all to me, and Paul and Lucy were raging mad about it. They came back the next day all fired up. You really think you can just take everything? Paul burst out as soon as he stepped in. I looked up, tired but standing my ground. Elaine decided this, Paul. It was her choice. Lucy was red in the face, yelling, You tricked a sick old lady? We won't let you get away with this. I stood up, fed up with their nonsense. Tricked? I was there for her, unlike you two. She chose to leave it to me, I said firmly. Paul was fuming. So you think you've beaten us? You think you can just snatch everything away? I let out a heavy sigh. I didn't snatch anything, Paul. Elaine gave it to me because she knew I actually cared. Their yelling didn't stop, but it was just noise against the truth I knew. I was there for Elaine when they weren't. The lawyer showed up with a video Elaine had made. Her voice filled the room as she said it, clear as day. I left everything to Anna because she was like the daughter I never had. She was there when my own kids weren't. She deserves it all. The room went quiet. Paul looked like he'd been punched in the gut, and Lucy started crying, finally realizing what they had done. After that, Paul and Lucy left, and all their threats just fell flat. I was alone in the big house, surrounded by the past and thinking about the future. I decided to divorce Paul. It was tough, but it had to be done. He and his new family had to move to a rental place. Lucy had her own mess to deal with. Her debts and bad choices were catching up to her. As for me, I was standing in my new house, feeling sad but also kind of excited. Elaine's will wasn't just about the house and money. It was like she was telling me to be strong and make my own way. I decided to start over, using what Elaine left me to build something new for myself. The house, once a reminder of tough times, was now a